The millionaire hired a messy maid to pretend as his girlfriend, but her hidden skill saved his company. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The rain had been falling over New York for hours, turning the glass walls of the Reynolds Tower into shimmering sheets of silver. Inside, the top-floor office still glowed long after midnight. Adrian Reynolds, the 35-year-old CEO of Reynolds Corporation, stood by the window with his sleeves rolled up and his tie undone. His reflection stared back at him, a man with power, money, and absolutely no peace. On his desk sat a single folder stamped with the word "Confidential" in bold letters. He exhaled slowly and turned toward the empty office. Tomorrow he would face the board again. The investors wanted proof that the rumors about his lonely, unstable image were false. The merger with the Henderson Group depended on it. What they wanted was a happy, family-oriented CEO. What he had was paperwork and silence. Then, the sound of footsteps broke the quiet. The glass door opened slightly, and a young woman stepped in holding a mop and a cleaning bucket. Lena Hart, the new night maid, froze when she saw him still standing there. Her uniform was tidy but old. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the marble floor. "Oh, I am sorry, Mr. Reynolds," she said quickly. "I thought everyone had gone home." Adrian turned toward her, his deep voice calm but deliberate. "You are fine. Close the door, please." She hesitated, then obeyed, clutching the handle of her mop like a shield. The air in the room felt heavy. Adrian's eyes moved from her hands, red from cleaning chemicals, to the faint tiredness beneath her eyes. There was something steady about her, something unpolished but honest. "How long have you worked here, Miss Hart?" he asked. "Almost 8 months, sir," she replied carefully. "Is something wrong?" He walked back to his desk, opened the folder, and studied it for a moment before saying the words that would change both of their lives. "I have a proposal for you," he said. Lena blinked. "A proposal?" "A professional arrangement," Adrian clarified. "For the next 3 months, you will pretend to be my girlfriend. Attend company events, appear in photos, smile at the right moments. In return, I will pay off your brother's hospital bills and transfer $100,000 into your account." Her breath caught. "You cannot be serious." "I am very serious," he said, meeting her eyes. "The board expects me to appear settled before the merger. You are quiet, responsible, and invisible to the press. You are perfect for this." Lena shook her head. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You work hard. You never gossip. You are the only person in this building who looks at me without pretending." She felt her stomach twist. "You are asking me to lie to the entire world." "I am asking you to sign an agreement," Adrian said evenly. "You can walk away if you want to, but something tells me you will not." Her voice trembled. "And why is that?" His tone softened just a little. "Because your brother is still in the hospital, and his insurance ran out last month. I checked the HR records. You have been paying his bills in cash." Lena's eyes widened. Shame and anger mixed inside her, but beneath it all was fear. "That is private." "I am offering a solution," he said quietly. 3 months of your time in exchange for his life. No strings, no expectations, just a contract." For a moment, she stood there in silence. The city lights flickered across the glass, washing her face in gold. She thought of her brother's fragile heartbeat, of the mounting bills, of the nights she had prayed for a miracle. Her hand shook as she set the mop aside and walked toward the desk. "If I say yes," she whispered, "you will pay immediately?" "Before dawn," Adrian promised. She stared at the folder, then picked up the pen. The moment the pen touched paper, the rain outside thundered louder, as if the city itself knew this decision would change everything. When she finished signing, Adrian reached into a drawer and produced a small silver bracelet. "Wear this at public events," he said. "It will make the story look real." Lena slid it onto her wrist. It felt cold, unfamiliar, like a chain disguised as jewelry. Adrian extended his hand. "Welcome to the agreement, Miss Hart." Her fingers trembled as she shook his. His hand was steady, warm, confident. Hers was small and uncertain. As she turned to leave, the storm outside flashed across the skyline. Somewhere deep down, a quiet thought whispered no contract, no matter how perfect, could ever predict what the heart would do next. The morning after the contract felt unreal. The storm had cleared, leaving New York washed clean and glowing beneath a pale winter Sunday. Inside the Reynolds penthouse, the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and new beginnings. Lena Hart stood at the counter, holding a cup with both hands, watching the city shimmer below. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light, glinting with every heartbeat. It was the only proof that last night had truly happened. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital blinked on the screen. Surgery approved. Payment received. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. Relief hit her so suddenly that her knees almost gave out. She pressed a hand over her mouth, whispering a shaky, "Thank you," into the quiet room. Behind her, a voice said, "Good news, I assume." She turned. Adrian Reynolds was already dressed in a dark suit, his hair still damp from the shower, his cufflinks catching the sunlight. Even in silence, his presence filled the room. "The hospital confirmed the payment," she said softly. "My brother is finally getting the surgery. Thank you." Adrian poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, studying her face. "You do not have to thank me. We have an agreement. You held your part, I held mine." "I know," she said, "but gratitude is not part of the contract. It is just human." He did not answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the folder lying open on the table. "There are additional guidelines you need to understand. Sit down, please." Lena obeyed, her fingers tightening around the mug. Adrian opened a new document and began to read in his steady, measured tone. "Appear publicly as my girlfriend at all official functions. Avoid contact with the media. Maintain discretion inside this building. No personal involvement beyond the professional arrangement. Termination of the contract only by mutual consent." Lena exhaled slowly. "You thought of everything." "I have to," he said. "My world runs on order. Chaos ruins reputations faster than scandal." She tilted her head slightly. "And people? Do you think order works on them too?" Adrian looked up, caught off guard by the question. "It has to," he said after a pause. She nodded, signing her name at the bottom of the page. "If this is what it takes, I will do it." His tone softened. "I do not intend to make this difficult, Lena. But you will need preparation. There is a charity gala next week. You will attend as my partner. My assistant, Claire, will arrange training in etiquette and wardrobe. You will meet her this afternoon." "Training?" she repeated, surprised. "Yes. You will be standing beside me in front of cameras and investors. People will notice everything. The wrong smile, the wrong dress, the wrong gesture. We cannot afford mistakes." Lena looked down at her worn sneakers and cheap uniform, then back up at him. "I can learn." He gave a faint smile. "I know you can. That is why I chose you." The words lingered in the air longer than they should have. For a brief second, something passed between them, too quick, too fragile to name. That afternoon, the transformation began. The penthouse, filled with stylists, tailors, and consultants, moving with the precision of a military operation. Fabric samples were draped over chairs, boxes of heels lined the hallway. Claire, a sharp woman with a headset and clipboard, circled Lena like a hawk. "Stand up straight, shoulders back. Smile, but not too wide. Wealth prefers subtlety," Claire said briskly. Lena tried to follow instructions, but everything felt foreign. The dresses fit perfectly, yet made her feel like someone else. The heels hurt. The makeup felt heavy. Every compliment sounded like a warning. When the last of the staff finally left, the penthouse fell silent again. Lena walked to the balcony, still wearing one of the new dresses, a soft ivory gown that shimmered like morning light. She leaned on the railing, looking out at the endless skyline. Behind her, Adrian ended a call and stepped outside. The wind tugged at his tie. He froze for half a second when he saw her. "You look different," he said quietly. "Different good or different bad?" she asked, trying to hide her discomfort. Different, right? He answered. She laughed softly. It still feels like I am pretending. Pretending is the job, he said. You just have to do it better than anyone else. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he was not just the CEO giving orders. There was something gentler in his gaze, a flicker of understanding she had not expected. Lena turned back to the city lights. Just 3 months, she murmured. I can survive 3 months. Adrian heard her but said nothing. He stood beside her, the silence stretching between them, filled with everything they could not yet say. And in that quiet, as the city pulsed below, the first invisible crack formed in the wall between them. By the end of the week, the Reynolds penthouse no longer felt quiet. From morning until night, stylists, consultants, and photographers moved in and out like a constant storm. Lena Hart followed every instruction, every posture, every smile that Claire demanded. She learned how to hold a champagne glass, how to walk without tripping in 4-inch heels, and how to speak just enough to sound charming but never opinionated. Each night, when the mirrors and dresses disappeared, she felt hollow. The woman staring back at her was flawless, graceful, and unrecognizable. Somewhere beneath the diamonds and silk, the messy maid was fading away. One evening, Adrian returned home late. His tie hung loose, and exhaustion shadowed his face. He found Lena sitting on the balcony, still in one of the new gowns, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. The city below glittered in gold and silver. "Why are you still awake?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. "I could not sleep," she admitted. "It feels strange, pretending to be someone else all day." He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "Pretending gets easier when you have a reason. You are doing this for your brother. I am doing it for the company. We both have something to lose." She studied him for a long moment. "And if it stops feeling like pretending?" Adrian looked toward the skyline, the light from the buildings reflecting in his eyes. "Then we are in trouble," he said quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind brushed against them, soft and cold. There was something in the air, an understanding that neither dared to name. The next afternoon, Lena visited the hospital. Her brother was recovering well after the surgery, his color returning, his smile weak but real. When the nurse mentioned that the payment had come directly from Reynolds Corporation, Lena felt a lump form in her throat. She leaned close and whispered, "It is all taken care of now. You can rest." Her brother smiled faintly. "You always find a way, Lena." She smiled back, though her heart ached with guilt. How could she explain that her miracle came from a contract? That evening, she returned to the penthouse. Adrian was on a call near the window, his voice low but sharp. "I do not care what the board thinks. The numbers will recover once the merger clears. And no, there will be no interviews before the gala. Make that clear." He ended the call and turned, noticing her watching. "Long day?" he asked. "Not as long as yours, apparently," she replied. "Do you ever stop working?" Adrian gave a faint laugh, one without humor. "Not if I want to stay ahead." Lena stepped closer. "Maybe you should try. Even machines need rest." He glanced at her, almost surprised. "You sound like someone who knows better than me." "Maybe I do," she said, smiling gently. For a brief second, the tension in his expression eased. "You are the only person who talks to me like that," he said. "That might be why you keep me around," she replied. He looked away, pretending to hide a smile, but the warmth in his voice betrayed him. Perhaps. The following weekend arrived faster than either of them expected. The night of the charity gala was cold and clear, the kind of evening that made the whole city shimmer. Inside the ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel, chandeliers blazed above tables draped in gold. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning. Adrian and Lena stood at the top of the marble staircase. Her gown was navy blue silk, the bracelet on her wrist catching every light. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, then offered his arm. "Remember what I told you," he said quietly. "You are Lena Hart, but tonight you are also the woman beside me. You belong here." Lena nodded, her heart hammering. "I will try." He leaned closer. "No, Miss Hart, you will not try. You will succeed." They descended the staircase together as the crowd turned toward them. Flashbulbs lit the air. Adrian smiled for the photographers, calm and confident, while Lena mirrored his poise with practiced grace. For a fleeting moment, she forgot about the contract, the hospital bills, the endless rules. She felt like she belonged there, next to him, in the center of a world she had only ever seen from a distance. When their eyes met under the glow of the chandeliers, Adrian gave her the smallest nod of approval. Something warm and unfamiliar settled between them, a spark neither of them could name. As the orchestra began to play, Lena realized that for the first time since signing the contract, she was not just pretending. She was living a scene she never dared to dream. And somewhere deep inside, Adrian Reynolds, the man who built his life on control, felt the same unsettling truth. This arrangement was beginning to feel dangerously real. The ballroom glittered under the chandeliers as the sound of violins filled the air. Adrian Reynolds moved through the crowd with practiced charm, greeting investors, shaking hands, and exchanging smiles that looked effortless but cost him every ounce of patience. Beside him, Lena Hart walked with quiet grace. Her navy gown flowed like silk water, her every movement precise, polished, and calm. Yet inside, her heart beat so loudly she was certain the room could hear it. "Mr. Reynolds," one of the older investors called out with a broad smile. "Your partner is even more beautiful than the photographs. You have done well." Adrian placed a hand lightly on Lena's back, his tone even. "I am fortunate she agreed to tolerate me. I am not exactly an easy man to impress." Laughter circled around them. Lena smiled politely, the kind of smile she had practiced for days. But as the evening went on, she noticed the stares, some curious, some admiring, and a few openly skeptical. She told herself to breathe, to stay composed, to remember that everything tonight was part of the job. Then, she saw her. Across the ballroom, a tall woman with golden hair and an elegant black gown stood speaking to a group of board members. Her laughter carried easily across the crowd. When her eyes met Adrian's, something shifted in the air. A brief flicker of familiarity crossed his expression, old, unspoken, complicated. Lena leaned closer. "Who is she?" she asked softly. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Her name is Elaine Carter. She used to be my vice president." "Used to be?" Lena asked, reading the unease in his eyes. "And used to be more than that," he said quietly. Lena understood immediately. Elaine looked like she belonged to this world, perfect posture, perfect smile, the kind of confidence money could not buy because it was born from power. A pang of discomfort ran through Lena, but she kept her composure as Elaine began to walk toward them. "Adrian," Elaine greeted with a voice that dripped with charm. "It has been far too long." "Elaine," Adrian replied politely, though his tone carried distance. "You remember Lena Hart, my partner." Elaine's gaze swept over Lena from head to toe, the corners of her mouth curving in a smile that was more assessment than kindness. "Of course, the press has been quite taken with your story. Congratulations, Miss Hart." "Thank you," Lena replied, extending her hand. "It is a pleasure to meet one of Adrian's former colleagues." Elaine's handshake was soft but deliberate. "Former, yes. Although I still have some interests tied to Reynolds Corporation. I imagine we will be seeing each other often." "I doubt that," Adrian said evenly. Elaine's laughter rang like crystal. "We will see." She turned and drifted away, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume. Lena exhaled slowly. "You did not tell me there was someone before me." "There was no reason to," Adrian answered. "It ended years ago." "But not for her," Lena said quietly. Adrian looked at her, surprised by the sharpness in her intuition. "You read people well." "It comes with cleaning up after them," she said, half smiling. "You notice what others leave behind." For the first time that night, Adrian smiled genuinely. "You might be better at this world than I thought." As the gala continued, the speeches began. The chairman praised Adrian for his vision, leadership, and stable personal life. Cameras flashed as Adrian and Lena stood together for photographs. Adrian's hand brushed hers, a practiced gesture for the press, but it lingered longer than expected. When the applause ended, he guided her toward the exit. Outside, the night was cool, the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. Lena took a deep breath, releasing the tension she had held all evening. "Did we pass the test?" she asked. Adrian looked at her with quiet admiration. We did more than pass. You were exceptional. She smiled faintly. I had a good teacher. He opened the car door for her. Do not get used to my compliments. The next event will be even harder. Lena settled into the seat, glancing at him as the car pulled away. You say that like a challenge. Maybe it is, he replied. The city lights blurred past their windows as silence filled the car. For the first time since the contract began, that silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt steady, like two people beginning to understand each other without needing words. When they arrived back at the penthouse, Adrian paused before unlocking the door. You did well tonight, Lena. So did you, she said softly. He nodded, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be another storm. As he walked toward his office, Lena stood for a moment in the quiet hallway, the sound of the city echoing faintly beyond the glass walls. She touched the bracelet on her wrist and realized something she could not yet admit aloud. The line between duty and desire was fading, and her heart was beginning to cross it. The days after the gala moved in, a blur of meetings, interviews, and endless phone calls. Adrian Reynolds became busier than ever, and yet the atmosphere inside the penthouse had changed. The silence that once felt cold now carried traces of something human. 2 coffee cups left on the counter, the faint echo of laughter from the kitchen when Lena Hart burned toast, the soft rhythm of conversation during breakfast. Adrian noticed these things but said nothing. He told himself it was temporary, part of the performance. Still, he found his thoughts drifting toward her voice, her quiet humor, and the calm she brought into a life built entirely on deadlines. Lena noticed the change, too. She saw the exhaustion behind his composed mask, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching, and the dark circles that no amount of money could hide. One night, she left a cup of tea beside his paperwork without a word. The next morning, she found a small note written in his careful handwriting. You do not have to take care of me, but thank you anyway. Even so, the contract hung between them like glass clear but impossible to break. Every glance, every unspoken kindness came with the reminder of what could not be. By midweek, the calm broke. The company was under pressure again. A report had leaked to the media suggesting that Adrian's relationship was staged to protect the company's image. Tabloids called it a strategic romance. Headlines questioned his leadership. Lena found him pacing in the office, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp with frustration. Find out who released it, he said, and shut it down before the stock opens. When he ended the call, she asked gently, Do you think it was Elaine? Adrian's jaw tightened. It has her fingerprints all over it. She still has connections. This is how she plays the game. What will you do? I will do what I always do, he replied. Control the story before it controls me. That afternoon, Adrian called a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, lights glaring, microphones crowding the podium. Lena stood beside him, her hands clasped, her expression calm even as the questions began to fire. Mr. Reynolds, is it true your relationship is part of a corporate strategy? Adrian looked directly into the cameras. No, he said firmly. My personal life has no connection to corporate decisions. Miss Hart is my partner, and that is the truth. A reporter turned to Lena. Miss Hart, did you know the rumors before agreeing to date him? She met the question head on. I knew who he was, she said softly, but I also know who he is when the cameras are gone. That is what matters. Her steady tone silenced the room. For a moment, the flashes stopped. Even Adrian, who had spent years mastering control, looked at her with something close to awe. When the conference ended, they stepped outside into the cool air. Adrian turned to her, his voice low. You saved us today. I told the truth, she said simply. People can tell when something feels real. He gave a faint smile. Then maybe this is starting to feel real. That night, they stood on the balcony again, the city lights stretching endlessly below. The wind played softly through Lena's hair. You did well today, he said quietly. So did you, she replied. Maybe we are getting good at this. Act. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Maybe it is not an act anymore. The city lights flickered around them as silence fell again. And in that stillness, both of them knew something had shifted. What began as a contract was slowly becoming something that neither business nor logic could explain. The following morning began in chaos. Adrian Reynolds was already in his office before sunrise, phone in hand, voice tight with urgency. Another leak had surfaced, internal documents this time, not gossip. The media claimed that confidential contracts and financial reports from Reynolds Corporation had been exposed. Every news outlet was calling it the company's biggest scandal in a decade. Lena Hart stood by the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt. Adrian looked different today. Not the unshakable CEO she had come to know, but a man holding everything together by sheer will. When he ended the call, he pressed his fingers to his temple, his jaw tense. "Coffee?" she asked quietly. He nodded without looking up. "Thank you." When she returned with the cup, she hesitated. "Is it really that bad?" He glanced at her, his eyes dark and focused. "Worse than bad. The leak includes internal audits, private emails, even personal correspondence. Whoever did this wanted to destroy everything. Do you think Elaine is behind it?" Adrian's expression hardened. "It has her written all over it. She still has contacts in the company. She knows where to strike." Lena took a step closer. "You can fix this. You always do." He gave a hollow laugh. "You have more faith in me than I deserve." "Then earn it," she said softly. Her words stopped him. For a moment, the weight in his shoulders eased. She was not pleading or comforting him. She was reminding him who he was. Adrian straightened. "There is a board meeting in 1 hour. They will demand my resignation. Then you walk in there and tell them the truth," Lena said. "You built this company. You know it's worth better than anyone. Let them see that." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "You sound more like my partner than my employee. Maybe that is what I am," she replied. An hour later, Adrian entered the boardroom. The air was thick with tension, and the faces around the long table were grim. Elaine was there, sitting among the investors with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She had been waiting for this moment. Adrian spoke clearly. "Yes, there was a leak. But every number in those files represents work, not deceit. I will not allow a decade of integrity to be rewritten by speculation." Elaine leaned back in her chair. "Integrity? You built your reputation on a fake relationship, Adrian. If you could lie about that, what else have you lied about?" Before he could answer, the doors opened. Lena stepped inside, holding a folder. The entire room turned toward her. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "If you question his integrity, perhaps you should see this first." She placed the folder on the table and slid it toward the chairman. "This is the security access log from last night. The breach came from Elaine Carter's old credentials, which were never deactivated after she was dismissed." A murmur spread across the room. Elaine's composure faltered. "That is impossible," she said, her voice trembling. The chairman's eyes narrowed. "Miss Carter, is this true?" Elaine stood abruptly, stammering. "Someone must have used my login." Adrian's tone was steady. "Enough. Let the evidence speak." Within minutes, the mood in the room shifted. The same people who had been ready to accuse him now turned their anger toward Elaine. Security was called, and she was escorted out of the building as whispers filled the hall. When the meeting finally ended, Adrian walked out to find Lena waiting near the elevator. He stopped in front of her, his voice quieter. Now, almost raw. "You saved me again." She smiled faintly. "You would have done the same for me." "Maybe," he said, "but you did it first." For the first time, he reached for her hand, not as part of a performance, but because he wanted to. She did not pull away. That night, back in the penthouse, Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her and raised his glass. "To survival," he said. Lena smiled. "To second chances." The glasses touched with a soft clink. The city glowed outside the windows, and for once, the silence between them was warm. Neither of them said the word love, but it lingered there unspoken, undeniable, and real. The following week, peace seemed to return to Reynolds Corporation. The board publicly cleared Adrian Reynolds of wrongdoing, and the company's stock began to climb again. The newspapers that had once questioned him now praised his resilience and leadership. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But inside the penthouse, A quiet distance began to grow. Lena Hart noticed it first. Adrian was working late again, locking himself in his office long after midnight. The man who once shared quiet laughter with her over coffee now barely looked up when she entered the room. Each time she asked if something was wrong, he brushed it off with a calm, polite, "I am fine." But she could feel it. The wall that had once crumbled between them was being rebuilt, brick by brick. One evening, Lena stood in the doorway of his office, watching him type under the glow of the desk lamp. "You are avoiding me," she said quietly. Adrian stopped, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I am protecting you. From what?" "From this," he said, gesturing toward the papers scattered around him. "From me. From this life. The contract is almost over, Lena. In a few weeks you will be free. You should start thinking about what comes next." Her voice trembled. "What if I do not want to leave?" Adrian looked up, his eyes shadowed with something like pain. "Do not say that unless you mean it." "I do mean it," she said. "You think this was only a job, but somewhere along the way it became real for me." He rose from his chair, the air between them charged. "Do you know what it means for me if you say that? I built my world around control. I do not know how to let anyone in without losing everything." Lena met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe it is time you stop trying to control everything." The room went silent. The city lights spilled through the glass walls, painting them both in gold and shadow. Adrian's breath was uneven, his voice low. "I have a shareholders' conference in Los Angeles tomorrow. I will be gone for a few days. When I return, we will talk about what happens next." She nodded, though her chest tightened. "Be careful," she whispered. He paused at the door, looking back one last time. "You have already done more for me than anyone ever has." After he left, the penthouse felt too quiet, too large. Lena stood by the window, staring at the skyline that had once looked like freedom and now felt like a cage. She touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, the same one that had begun this strange journey, and whispered, "Please come back." She had no way of knowing that Adrian's flight would land in the middle of another storm, one that would test whether what they had built was strong enough to survive beyond any contract or condition. The next 48 hours unfolded like a storm. Adrian Reynolds landed in Los Angeles under heavy rain, but before he could even check into his hotel, his phone began to buzz with urgent calls. A new cyber attack had hit Reynolds Corporation, this time targeting financial accounts and personal data. The company was under siege again, and the losses could destroy everything he had just rebuilt. He called immediately. "Lena, listen carefully. Stay inside the penthouse. Lock every door and do not open for anyone. Someone is trying to bring us both down." Her voice shook. "Adrian, what is happening?" "I will handle it," he said. "Just promise me you will stay safe." "I promise," she whispered. Back in New York, the sky was dark and violent. Thunder rolled through the city as Lena paced the penthouse, her phone clutched in her hand. Every news channel screamed the same headline: Reynolds Corporation hit by second data breach. Reporters speculated that this time the company might not survive. She tried calling Adrian again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. Hours passed in suffocating silence until a message from his assistant appeared. "Mr. Reynolds is safe. The storm has grounded all flights. Communication will resume when possible." Relief washed through her, but it lasted only a moment. The elevator chimed. She froze. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Someone had entered the penthouse. "Who is there?" she called out, her voice echoing through the room. A cold, familiar voice answered from the shadows. "You should have stayed out of this, Lena." It was Elaine Carter. She stepped forward, her expression twisted with fury, holding a small flash drive between her fingers. "You think you won, but you ruined everything. I built this company with him. I was supposed to stand beside him, not a maid pretending to be perfect." Lena stood her ground, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "You destroyed yourself, Elaine. All I did was tell the truth." Elaine's smile hardened. "The truth is that he was mine, and if I cannot have him, neither will you." She lunged forward, shoving Lena against the glass wall. The flash drive flew from her hand, sliding across the floor. Lena struggled, pushing back with all her strength. "It is over," she gasped. "You will not hurt him again." Sirens wailed from below. Security had been alerted. Elaine froze. For an instant, realization flashing in her eyes. "He will never love you," she hissed, before guards burst through the door. They pulled her back as she screamed, her voice fading down the hallway. Lena collapsed to her knees, shaking but unhurt. The flash drive glinted under the lights. She picked it up and whispered, "It is finally over." Hours later, when Adrian finally returned, drenched from the storm, he found her waiting. The moment he saw her, the tension in his face broke. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the world had almost taken her away. "I thought I lost everything," he said softly. "You did not," Lena whispered against his shoulder. "You still have me." And for the first time, Adrian realized that the one thing in his life, not written in a contract, was the only thing that truly mattered. The storm that had shaken their lives finally passed. Morning sunlight poured through the glass walls of the Reynolds penthouse, spilling across the polished floors and quiet rooms. For the first time in months, the city below felt calm. Adrian Reynolds stood beside Lena Hart on the balcony, watching the sunrise wash the skyline in gold. Everything that had once threatened to destroy them, the leaks, the lies, the contracts, was over. Elaine Carter had been arrested that night. The stolen data was recovered, and the company's name cleared. The board released a public statement praising Adrian for his honesty and resilience. But for him, none of it mattered as much as the woman standing beside him. Lena turned toward him, her voice gentle. "So, what happens now?" Adrian looked down at her hand, the same hand that had once signed a contract, trembling with fear. "The agreement ended last night," he said softly. "But I realized something before I came home. I cannot let you go." Her eyes widened slightly. "You do not have to say that because of what happened. I am not saying it out of gratitude," he replied. "I am saying it because it is true. You walked into my life as part of a deal, but you became the reason I finally learned what loyalty and love really mean." Lena smiled faintly, her voice breaking with emotion. "Love? Are you sure that is not just another business term to you?" Adrian's lips curved into a real smile. "No contract could define this. It is the one investment I will never regret." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring, unlike the first bracelet. This one was real, chosen not for appearances, but for meaning. "I bought this yesterday," he said quietly. "Not because the world expects it, but because I want to wake up every day knowing that what we have is real." Lena's hand trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Tears filled her eyes. "Adrian," he took her hands in his, steady and warm. "No contracts, no conditions, just us." Her answer came through a whisper that felt louder than any promise. "Yes." That evening, the two of them stood again on the balcony where everything had begun. The same city that had once witnessed deception now glowed beneath them like a promise reborn. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the last traces of sunset fade into night. "Do you remember the night I signed that contract?" she asked. "I do," he said. "You thought it was the end of your freedom." She smiled through her tears. "And you thought it was the only way to control your life." Adrian nodded. "It turns out we were both wrong. That contract did not trap us. It brought us here." The wind moved gently around them, carrying the quiet hum of the city below. The world continued, but for a moment, it belonged only to them. Adrian looked at her one last time, his voice calm but full of feeling. Sometimes love does not start with a promise. Sometimes it starts with a contract and ends with the truth. Lena smiled, resting her hand over his heart. "Then this is our truth." As the lights of New York shimmered beneath them, the story of the Millionaire and the Maid found its ending not in scandal or pretense, but in redemption and love that needed no signatures to last forever.